Hey everybody, so I'm going to go ahead and try something pretty different today. I'm going to try to give a sort of, not exactly a lesson, but just like one of my normal tutorial videos on step components on the OPXY, and then I'm going to try to edit this later. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to assume that you already know how to add and edit step components, so I can make a separate video if needed for that, but that's out of the scope of this video. And I'm also going to assume that you're pretty comfortable overall navigating the XY, changing tracks, adding patterns, adding scenes, things like that. So if that's not you, then this video will probably be a little bit harder to follow. Okay, I've just got a default project up here that I've changed all the gain levels and the compressor level on, but otherwise it's just all of the default patches. So the first, and I would personally argue the most important, is the conditionals. So there are these last three here. So this is skip trigger, this one is skip component, and this one is skip parameter. And so they work, they both work pretty similarly. Let's just open up keys. Yeah. What skip trigger, this last one here, can do, it'll determine when the notes on this step are played. And so right now, what this is showing me is it's showing me that it will not play any note the first time it goes past this step, but it will play on the second time. If I press 2 again, the flashing one means it'll play the notes on this step the first time, but not the second time. And this sort of logic applies just across the board here. So if I press 9, this means it's not going to play anything the first 8 times, but it will every 9th time. First of every 9th time, the first 8 out of every 9, and then 2 through 9 out of every 9, but it will not play it that first time. Hopefully that part is somewhat straightforward. There's obviously a lot that you can do with this. You can make it so you add like a drum fill every 4th time. I'll just make a very basic so I'll just have it where it's going to play a pretty basic pattern, but then every 4th time it's also going to add in these 3 notes. So in this case, I may also just make this one happen every 2nd time. What I've basically done here is make it so that I've got a very basic pattern, but every 2nd time, it's also going to add in this little extra kick on that last 8th note before, or whatever you'd call this, on the 14th step. And then every 4th time, it's also going to add in a kick and an extra snare hit. So we've basically made like a pretty straightforward 4-bar loop with some variation, just using the what is it, skip trigger. And actually in this case, let's remove that. And maybe we'll have that happen only the first of every 2 times. Okay, so that's basically how all 3 of these work. The difference, though, is that instead of skipping the notes on a trigger, and actually one more really important detail to provide here, I'm going to play this in slowly, and you'll see that skip trigger doesn't always apply how you would expect if the notes spill into a different step. And what I'll do is I'll make it so that this step only happens every 2nd time. And so that's actually going to be, I think, our last note that we played. So just something to be aware of, that even if you do have a skip trigger on one step, if some of those notes spill into the step next to it, it's not going to affect those notes that have spilled over. That is skip trigger. Let's talk about the next one, which is pretty similar, but it's just there's a meaningful difference. So I'm actually going to, instead of going straight from skip trigger to skip component, I'm going to go to skip parameter. And what this does is it changes how this handles parameter locks. As of the latest update, we can now actually parameter lock some of the some of these steps, which is kind of cool. Or the drum engine steps. What I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to make it so that... Oh, is it not actually adjusting what I asked it to? That's a bummer. I think what I'm going to try to do then... Okay, let me just make sure I actually have one to, you know, to actually show you. So let's just make it so that the envelope here is just a little bit. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, on this step, held shift and selected that step, I'm going to add a skip parameter 2. So it's only going to apply that slower attack every second pass. So on this first one, it's going to be the regular envelope. And the second one's going to be really soft. And this follows the same logic for values that skip trigger did, which is that flashing 4 means it's only going to apply all the parameter locks on this step every fourth of 4 times. The first of every 4 times, first 3 of every 4 times, and then 2, 3, and 4, but not the first time. That's as much as I want to cover the skip and parameter, or the skip trigger and skip parameter step components. Next, I'm going to move on to skip component. Now, worth noting is that these 3 conditionals do not affect each other. So if I have a, right here, this is going to make it so that, the envelope of this is a little bit softer on 2, 3, and 4, but that actually has nothing to do with the skip trigger. So if I make it so that this skip trigger only plays the first 3 of 4 times, it's not going to affect this. It will play it the first time with that harsh attack, second and third time with the softer attack, and then the fourth time it'll still apply that soft attack, but it's not going to play any of the notes on here because of our skip trigger. Okay, so we got a question here. How do you switch between this every 4th time or every 3 and not the 4th time? The way that you do that is after you've selected a step, and in this case, instead of tapping one of these, I'm going to hold it because it already has like a skip parameter on it, and I just want to edit it instead of erase it. You just keep pressing the same value button repeatedly. So if I go 3, 4, 5, then each time it's just going to have the last one flashing. But if I go 4, 4, 4, 4, it'll cycle through those options. And of course, with 2, you only actually have 2 options. With 3, that's when you start having all 4 options of the, all four options there. What did I apply this on? There we go. I think that's what it was. The next conditional is skip component. And so this is going to apply to all step components from jump back to pulse. So this one does not affect these 2 at all. Like I was saying before, these 3 do not impact each other. I'm actually going to really quickly take one step back because I realized I forgot something pretty important here, which is that there's not just 9 values for these, right? There's also 0, and that's going to be random, and that may not work how you're expecting. It's not going to randomly play this chord on this step. It's going to play a random combination of triggers on this step. So it may play just that 5th, it may play just these 2 notes, it may play no notes, it may play all of them. So it's not just like all or nothing type of random, but it is just like it will randomly mute some of the triggers on that step. Yeah, that time it only played that. Yeah. Thanks for being a great example, buddy, XY. Let's remove that trigger spark there, especially because I think that the drum track is doing a good enough job of demonstrating what I was going for there anyway. The next section is going to be about specifically velocity and tonality. I use those quite a bit, actually. I'm going to use my skip component examples for velocity and tonality. Velocity is relatively straightforward. Skip trigger from here, so that way we can hear it every time, and I'm going to make the velocity a little bit lower. So I didn't hear a difference, so I'm going to open up the instrument menu, make sure that velocity sensitivity is reasonably high, and then I'm going to try an even lower value. Let's try 16, so that's velocity 3. Let's do even lower. Oh, does it have velocity? No. And then what I'll also do is I'm going to add a send. That's actually kind of cool, huh? I'm leaving it. Question is it the same behavior on the OPZ for these spark/skip components? Yes, it's the same behavior. The only difference is that I believe 9 is random and then 0 is reset counter, which never fully worked, and or at least not the way you would expect, and they dropped that for the XY. So this is actually a little bit more straightforward, but it's basically the same idea. Let's move on to... Oh, right. What I was going to show you there is I'm going to add a skip component 4. Oh, wait. No, yes, that is what I want. So what I'm doing is I'm making it so it's applying this much quieter velocity the first 3 of every 4 times. Then the 4th time, it's going to just be a regular velocity. And just to emphasize that what this is not just going to apply to velocity, but if I also had any other of these step components between jump and pulse, it would also only apply those the first 3 times. And let's make it so that send to the delay is only the first of every 2 times. So that last time it was a little louder, and it might have been hard to hear, but just believe me, that last one was a little bit louder because it didn't apply that velocity. Let's try to make this sound a little bit better. So minor break, I'm going to spend a couple minutes here just adding some effect sends and maybe messing with the filters a little bit and playing with the effects a little bit, just so that way this sounds a little bit more pleasant, because we are barely, we're not just getting started, but I've probably got a good half hour or more to cover here, and I don't want this to sound obnoxious. I'll make a full video, and then at the end I'll be like, holy crap, I can't stand that chord progression anymore. Everybody's going to hate that. So back to the actual thing I was talking about. I mentioned velocity, and velocity has one more super helpful thing, which is it's another way to mute steps. So if you may have picked up on the fact that if I can easily make it so that this happens every 4th time, the first of every 4 times, first 3 of every 4, or not 1, but on 2 through 4, what if I only want it to happen on 2 and 3 though? So we have to be a little bit more creative with this. And the way that we're going to be a little more creative is by combining the skip triggers with these other skips. And so I'm going to change things up a little bit here. I'm going to go ahead and just delete this step, so that way we remove all the parameter locks and stuff on it, and I'm going to start fresh here. It's the same basic idea that it's this accent hit over here on the 16th step, and it's a snare still. But what I'm going to do now is let's make this so it only happens on 2 and 3. First, I'm going to add a skip trigger 4, 4, and 4. So right now it's going to play this step, then it's going to trigger the notes on it on steps 1, 2, and 3, but not on 4. We're going to layer this now with a skip component, and I'm going to, instead of selecting 4, 4, 4, 4 like we did on the last one, I'm just going to press 4 a couple times. And I'm going to make it apply this the first of every 4 times. We haven't yet selected a step component, so right now this isn't going to do anything on that first step. Yeah, it'll still play it. But what we can add here is a velocity 9, which is just going to be a velocity 0, or in other words, it's going to totally mute this step. And that's only going to happen the first of every 4 times. So with those two combined, we've made ourselves a pattern where it only plays every second and third time, or it only adds that accent hit. So let's listen real quick. And just because I see this question coming, like, or at least I'm anticipating it, I generally keep things, especially for drums, to 1 page because I really like to be able to see everything that's happening. I like to be able to see the accent hits that don't happen every time, and I'm more comfortable looking through the step components to figure out what's going on than I am changing pages / bars and trying to figure out where I am. There are exceptions to this, and we're about to get into them once we get to the 3rd section, but in general, yeah, you're going to see me a lot of the time, especially with percussion stuff, using just 1 page. Next, let's go, and we're going to continue on about velocity and tonality. Right now, I'm going to do something kind of odd, though. I just decided that this would be a good way of illustrating this. I'm going to change the engine to just drum, and by scrolling up and down, I've made it so it's cleared all of the samples that were on this track before. And I'm going to add some individual samples. I'll just start off with C, and I'm going to press the sample button, which is going to then bring up the sample menu, and I'm going to put some sort of hi-hat sound here. Let's try to do, and let's over here, let's do just the open hat equivalent of that, of boop A. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the play mode is mute group so that they cut each other off. I'm happy with that. Next, I'm going to add a real big high pass filter, because this is just going to be like percussion type stuff here on this track. Make sure velocity sensitivity is decently high. Oops. And here's what I'll do for now. Right now, I'm just going to make it so that these 4 steps, they're each a 16th note, and here's what we got right now. It works. Not great, but it works. Things that we can do is we can add a velocity and add a low amount. So I'm going to add a velocity 2. So it's still playing these steps, but this one is going to be louder. Adds a bit of a sense of groove in a way. Speaking of which, if we want to, we could increase the groove on the track, which also affects the velocity and stuff. Actually, let's turn the groove down to 0, but then let's turn it up overall. Oops. We can do this on different steps and have different steps be the ones that are being emphasized. So I'll make it so that there's that velocity on these 3, but not on the first one. I could add a multiply 2. Now, here's the thing. If I wanted that multiply 2 to only happen every second pass, I'm going to run into a little bit of trouble here, because if I add a skip component there, it's also going to skip the velocity. And so we're going to have these first 2 16th notes are going to be just as loud as each other. And maybe that's fine. Maybe that's exactly what we're going for. Or basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it so that the multiply happens every second time. And we can hear that multiply. But I also want this to be a little quiet. And what I could do for that is I could go into the mixer and I can go ahead and just decrease it on that step. Not beautiful, but it kind of works, right? We got another question here. Isn't there a way just to edit the velocity of the step without a step component? I don't know if there is, actually. Yeah, I know pitch bend on the OPC was supposed to do that. I do not think it does on the XY. I don't know if there's a way of doing that. There may be. I just truth be told, I just generally turn off most velocity things when I'm making music anyway. So, just because I'm not the most sensitive, player. I've got terrible dynamics, so I guess I just remove the dynamics. Probably not the best choice, but that's me. Anyway. Gosh, I've gotten myself so off track here. Let's talk about tonality now. So I'm going to return to our hi-hat track here. Right now, if I use tonality, let's use tonality, and tonality is going to change the note that is played here, or the trigger that's played here. And so if I make this play an octave up, it's going to, instead of playing this note, it's going to play this one, which is nothing. And that's most of this track, right? But, as you may have seen, I did add a note, a semitone above this one. And so what I can do here is I can use the tonality, 6? Which is chromatic up or a semitone up, chromatic down or a semitone down. And that just means it's going to be the note next to whichever note you're on. So chromatic up means that it's going to play this. And what if I want to do that? Let's just do it every fourth time. And let's do something similar. Let's do a I keep getting those confused. A tonality 6 on this first one, and a component 1 out of 8. There we go. As you may be seeing, I'm going back to the ones that I mentioned earlier, and that's not for education's sake. It's because I use the conditional ones all the time, and you're seeing some of my process here, which is I'm going to play around with this. I don't need to get it right on the very first time, and I feel like step components for me are a huge part of that process because they allow me to mess with different steps without necessarily changing the notes on it, and it also allows me to mess with the structure, which is what we're about to get to. But first, I'm going to talk a little more about tonality, which has a few more things that I use pretty often. I never use tonality 8, 9, and 0, so I'm not going to really talk about them at all. I do use 6 and 7, how I just showed, most often on drum tracks, but sometimes they can sound pretty decent on melodic tracks. Part of why, for me, I use chromatic a lot on drum tracks is because usually I'll put maybe a closed and an open hi-hat next to each other. And so that's really good, or maybe I'll have toms next to each other or similar snares or something like that. So I use chromatic a lot on drums, but I'm more likely to use octave on melodic tracks. So let me do octave up. And so the first time it's going to be in the octave that the notes actually are on, and then every second time it's going to bump them all up an octave. Okay, thanks, Geraldo. Really appreciate it. One thing I was going to say is I prefer using the octave one, which is 3, I'll sometimes use fifth, which is 4. I rarely use third, and that's because when the XY detects what scale I'm in, what mode I'm in, all that good stuff, when it detects that, it's not always right, and you can get into a lot of trouble if it detects the chord wrong when you're dealing with a third, because it might make everything sound like crap, basically. So I don't need to go into more detail than that. So I generally stick to octave, fifth, chromatic up, chromatic down. I don't really mess with these because I literally don't use the brain, broadly speaking, and I also don't use the OPXY's brain track for transposition. Yeah, like I said, 890, quantizing it to the scale of the brain, that means nothing to me. That's not helpful. So I basically stick with 3, 4, 6, and 7. And I find I can add a ton of variation with this. Let's add a fifth up on that one. And what if we make it so that every second time this one is a solid octave up? Now let's turn that high pass down a bit, turn the velocity sensitivity way down, and I'm going to hold shift and press minus to transpose these down an octave. Okay, never mind. Let's transpose it back up an octave. Maybe up 2 octaves. I wonder what that'll sound like. Okay, so that's basically all I got to say about velocity and tonality. The only other thing may be like there is a velocity 0 that does a random velocity, but as a control freak, I don't like that. I want to control the velocity and either play it in or edit it using a step component. I don't want to not know what it will be. So let's go ahead and move on to the next section, which is going to be jump. But jump can basically be used in a few different ways. I would say my favorite is to repeat a bar a certain number of times or repeat a smaller part of a bar a certain number of times. I used to be, especially when I'd be messing around with the OPZ, I used to be a bigger fan of the jumps that let you jump, just skip a component or go back. I don't use that as much on the XY because of the additional bars and stuff like that. So here's what I'll do. Let's say I have this basic pattern here. We'll listen to it on its own. And what if I don't want to use all of my weird step components, all of my weird skip triggers and stuff like that to add variation or have a fill to this? Well, what I can do here, hold down bar, hold down shift and press plus. And this is copy this to the second page here. And I can make this second page like my fill. Let's just add in a few more snare hits. Why not? So this is the second page. And if I go back to the first page, I can add a step component, a jump 1 on the 16th step. And what that's going to do is every time it gets to the 16th step, it's going to repeat go back to the beginning of this bar. But I don't want to do that indefinitely because I do want it to play that fill. So what I can do is I can add my skip component, 3, 3, and 3. So this is going to play it once, jump back on the first pass, play it a second time, jump back, play it a third time, and then it's going to go on to that fourth bar. So let's listen. All right, and what I was going to do here is let's just remove those tonalities. And what I'm going to do is let's add a jump 1 right here. And I'm going to do almost exactly what I just did on the drum track, but I'm going to do 3, 3, 3. And yeah, we're going to leave it like this. There's no second page here, but this is just going to make it so it jumps back to step 1 right here, and then plays this section 3 times before it plays this once. Now, this can also be used a couple different ways. So, and this is where step components become a bit more part of my workflow. So I'm making this a skip. I press 2 twice. So it's going to apply this jump the first of every 2 times. And it's going to jump back to step 1. Jump 1 through 4 refer to step 1, 5, 9, and then 13. So I'm going to have it jump back to step 9 here, and similarly, only the first of every 2 times. So now I've gone from AAAB to AABB. Okay, so what we can do now also is let's use this same jump logic and affect this. So instead of having just 4 steps, I'm moving on to 8. What? Wild, right? Absolutely wild. But on this last step, I'm going to split this up and we're going to do a jump 1. And the reason why I'm doing it so many times here is because this is only going to last 2 bars. Because it's only 4 steps. That's all I'm saying. And so I'm going to make something very similar in terms of I'm going to add a jump 2, which goes to step 5 here. And let's have this happen. Let's just do it every... how about that? We'll see how that goes. Maybe we'll have it do that 4 times. 8 was the right answer. 8 was the right answer. And so at this point, I want to emphasize that this is one decision as to how you can use step components. This is not the only way of doing it. This isn't the only way I do it. But at least for me, it's very helpful to be able to condense some things. The big downside of this approach is that if I want to edit just the fill on this, that is a bit of a nightmare. There are a couple things that you can do to work around this. Like, so for example, I could remove some of the component sparks that just indefinitely repeats the fill, and I could go around and do that on each pattern. Then I got to remember to undo that later. But otherwise, there's no way with this particular setup to just be listening to the fill on repeat. So that can be problematic. You can see how much it can save space, but also that can have its own downsides. And so I'm just trying to show you some of the more extreme ways that I would use it. And I normally wouldn't have each track so densely populated with step components on my own. This is seriously just for the demo. Like I might have just this hi-hats track or this percussion track. I might just have that with all these step components. But it'd be really unusual for me to have step component fills on all 4 or 5 tracks. All 4, I guess. The other thing that I would say is really cool about jump is that I like jump 8. And jump 8 will just keep the playhead in place. So what if I only want it to play through the bass 1 time for some reason? I'm adding a jump 8 on step 16. Oh, I just realized a really cool way that you could use this. So let's just go back here and let's wait for the bass playhead to just be stuck here. And I just realized how you make it catch right back up and come right back in, is that you hold it down, so you edit the step components and you hold down jump, and then the next one we're going to add is going to be a 9, which is immediately going to catch it up to the playhead. Not super smooth, but smooth enough. So I just showed you how to keep the playhead in one place using jump 8. Pulse and hold can be used to repeat steps at like a certain repeat steps a certain number of time and hold the step for a certain duration each time, and then multiply can be done to repeat the notes on the step each time. You've already seen me use that a little bit here. I used multiply 2. So multiply 2 is what every 2 and 3 of 3. We hear this kind of doubling, or not doubling sound, but there's like faster playback sound, right? I could make that more extreme. I could make it 3. So that's kind of cool. This actually is a time when I might use multiply random because I was liking all the different variations that they had there. Let me just edit or show you how I could use pulse, hold, and multiply on this last step here. So this is when we are just listening. That's like the fill part of this, or the beat part, I mean. We could do that all without that jump. And so what we could do here is we could have it repeat this step 4 times. But that's just going to play it as 4/16 notes, which is not what we want. Instead, we're going to pulse it 4 times and we're going to hold for 4. And so this is going to play a quarter note because we're on 16th notes. It's going to hold it for 4 times that long, right? So we could do 1, which is just going to make it so that it lasts the full step, all the way up to 9 or random if we wanted. But we want it to hold for 4, right? Because we want there to be 4 quarter notes. And that's exactly what we want. That's our little fill now, and it's all just condensed into 1 step. But then we're going to have these extra steps that will throw us off of time. But let's listen to it just for the sake of learning, education, me taking a sip of my drink, whatever. And importantly, I forgot that this played 8 times, not 4 times. So I'm changing the pulse to 8. Each time it's still only holding for the equivalent of 4 steps or for a quarter note. But we're now going to have it repeat 8 times, which is what it did before. And spoiler, instead of listening to this all through again and hearing it get off of time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, I could either add a jump 1 at the end of this, because that's exactly where it's going to go. Or I could add a jump 9. And jump 9 is just going to bring it back to wherever the playhead is supposed to be. So let's first of all do a jump 9. And it's going to follow this after it plays 4 quarter notes of this. And like I said, it would do the exact same thing, oops, if I instead did a jump 1. Like I said, this is like really, it's not a comprehensive look at step components, nor is it as deep as it could go, but this is, in my mind, basically like what I use for 99% of my like reasoning through step components and stuff like that on like any project. So thanks for tuning in. Let me know your thoughts on the format. And thank you all so much for the super chat thing. That was a fun thing to just kind of add on. No pressure there ever. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.